Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Dark Screams, Volume 4, edited by Brian James Freeman and Richard Chismer, narrated by Joe Barrett. The Departed, by Clive Barker. It was not only painters who were connoisseurs of light, Hermione had come to learn in the 3 days since her death. So, too, were those obliged to shun it. She was a member of that fretful clan now, a phantom in the world of flesh. And if she hoped to linger here for long, she would have to avoid the sun's gift as scrupulously as a celibate avoided sin, and for much the same reason. It tainted, corrupted, and finally drove the soul into the embrace of extinction. She wasn't so unhappy to be dead. Life had been no bowl of cherries. She had failed at love, failed at marriage, failed at friendship, failed at motherhood. The last stung the sharpest. If she could have plunged back into life to change one thing, she would have left the broken romances in pieces and gone to her 6-year-old son Finn to say, "Trust your dreams and take the world lightly, for it means nothing, even in the losing." She had shared these ruminations with one person only. His name was Rice, an ethereal nomad like herself, who had died wasted and crazed from the plague, but was now in death, returned to corpulence and wit. Together, they had spent that 3rd day behind the blinds of his shunned apartment, listening to the babble of the street and exchanging tidbits. Toward evening, conversation turned to the subject of light. "I don't see why the sun hurts us and the moon doesn't," Hermione reasoned. "The moon's reflected sunlight, isn't it?" "Don't be so logical," Rice replied, "or so damn serious." "And the stars are little suns. Why doesn't starlight hurt us?" "I never liked looking at the stars," Rice replied. "They always made me feel lonely, especially toward the end. I'd look up and see all that empty immensity, and—" He caught himself in mid-sentence. "Damn you, woman, listen to me. We're going to get you out of here and party." She drifted to the window. "Down there?" she said. "Down there." "Will they see us?" "Not if we go naked." She glanced around at him. He was starting to unbutton his shirt. "I can see you perfectly well," she told him. "But you're dead, darling. The living have a lot more trouble." He tugged off his shirt and joined her at the window. "Shall we dare the dusk?" he asked her, and without waiting for a reply, raised the blind. There was just enough power in the light to give them both a pleasant buzz. "I could get addicted to this," Hermione said, taking off her dress and letting the remnants of the day graze her breasts and belly. "Now you're talking," said Rice. "Shall we take the air?" All Hallows Eve was a day away, a night away, and every shop along Main Street carried some sign of the season. A flight of paper witches here, a cardboard skeleton there. "Contemptible," Rice remarked, as they passed a nest of rubber bats. "We should protest." "It's just a little fun," Hermione said. "It's our holiday, darling, the Feast of the Dead. I feel like Jesus at a Sunday sermon. How dare they simplify me this way?" He slammed his phantom fists against the glass. It shook, and the remote din of his blow reached the ears of a passing family, all of whom looked toward the rattling window, saw nothing, and, trusting their eyes, moved on down the street. Hermione gazed after them. "I want to go and see Finn," she said. "Not wise," Rice replied. "Screw wise," she said. "I want to see him." Rice already knew better than to attempt persuasion, so up the hill they went, toward her sister Elaine's house, where she assumed the boy had lodged since her passing. "There's something you should know," Rice said as they climbed, "about being dead." "Go on." "It's difficult to explain, but it's no accident we feel safe under the moon. We're like the moon." reflecting the light of something living, something that loves us. Does that make any sense? Not much. Then it's probably the truth." She stopped her ascent and turned to him. "Is this meant as a warning of some kind?" she asked. "Would it matter if it were?" "Not much." He grinned. "I was the same. A warning was always an invitation." End of discussion? End of discussion. There were lamps burning in every room of Elaine's house, as if to keep the night and all it concealed at bay. How sad, Hermione thought, to live in fear of shadows. But then didn't the day now hold as many terrors for her as night did for Elaine? Finally, it seemed, after 31 years of troubled sisterhood, the mirrors they had always held up to each other, fogged until this moment, were clear. Regret touched her, that she had not better known this lonely woman whom she had so resented for her lack of empathy. "Stay here," she told Rice. "I want to see them on my own." Rice shook his head. "I'm not missing this," he replied, and followed her up the path, then across the lawn toward the dining-room window. From inside came not 2 voices, but 3. A woman, a boy, and a man, whose timbre was so recognizable it stopped Hermione in her invisible tracks. "Thomas," she said. "Your ex?" Rice murmured. She nodded. "I hadn't expected. You'd have preferred him not to come and mourn you?" "That doesn't sound like mourning to me," she replied. Nor did it. The closer to the window they trod, the more merriment they heard. Thomas was cracking jokes, and Finn and Elaine were lapping up his performance. "He's such a clown," Hermione said. "Just listen to him." They had reached the sill now and peered in. It was worse than she'd expected. Tom had Finn on his knee, his arms wrapped around the child. He was whispering something in the boy's ear, and as he did so, a grin appeared on Finn's face. Hermione could not remember ever being seized by such contrary feelings. She was glad not to find her sweet Finn weeping. Tears did not belong on that guileless face. But did he have to be quite so content, quite so forgetful of her passing? And as to Tom the clown, how could he so quickly have found his way back into his son's affections, having been an absentee father for 5 years? What bribes had he used to win back Finn's favor, master of empty promises that he was? "Can we go trick-or-treating tomorrow night?" the boy was asking. "Sure we can, partner," Thomas replied. "We'll get you a mask and a cape and—" "You too," Finn replied. "You have to come too. Anything you want." "Son of a bitch," Hermione said. "From now on—" "He never even wrote to the boy while I was alive." "Anything you want." "Maybe he's feeling guilty," Rice suggested. "Guilty?" she hissed, clawing at the glass, longing to have her fingers at Thomas's lying throat. "He doesn't know the meaning of the word." Her voice had risen in pitch and volume, and Elaine, who had always been so insensitive to nuance, seemed to hear its echo. She rose from the table, turning her troubled gaze toward the window. "Come away," Rice said, taking hold of Hermione's arm, "or this is going to end badly." "I don't care," she said. Her sister was crossing to the window now, and Thomas was sliding Finn off his knee, rising as he did so, a question on his lips. "There's somebody watching us," Elaine murmured. There was fear in her voice. Thomas came to her side, slipped his arm around her waist. Hermione expelled what she thought was a shuddering sigh, but at the sound of it the window shattered, a hail of glass, driving man, woman, and child back from the sill. "Away!" Rice demanded, and this time she conceded, went with him across the lawn, out into the street, through the benighted town, and finally home to the cold apartment where she could weep out the rage and frustration she felt. Her tears had not dried by dawn, nor even by noon. She wept for too many reasons, and for nothing at all. For Finn, for Thomas, for the fear in her sister's eyes, and for the terrible absence of sense in everything. At last, however, her unhappiness found a salve. "I want to touch him one last time," she told Rice. "Finn?" "Of course, Finn." "You'll scare the bejesus out of him." "He'll never know it's me." She had a plan. If she was invisible when naked, then she would clothe every part of herself and put on a mask and find him in the streets playing trick-or-treat. She would smooth his fine hair with her palm, or lay her fingers on his lips, then be gone forever, out of the twin states of living death and Idaho. "I'm warning you," she told Rice. "You shouldn't come." "Thanks for the invitation," he replied a little ruefully. "I accept." His clothes had been boxed and awaited removal. They untaped the boxes and dressed in motley. The cardboard they tore up and shaped into crude masks, horns for her, elfin ears for him. By the time they were ready for the streets, All Hallows Eve had settled on the town. It was Hermione who led the way back toward Elaine's house, but she set a leisurely pace. Inevitable meetings did not have to be hurried to, and she was quite certain she would encounter Finn if she simply let instinct lead her. There were children at every corner, dressed for the business of the night. Ghouls, zombies, and fiends, every one, freed to be cruel by mask and darkness, as she was freed to be loving, one last time, and then away. "Here he comes," she heard Rice say, but she'd already recognized Finn's jaunty step. "You distract Tom," she told Rice. "My pleasure," came the reply, and the Revenant was away from her side in an instant. Tom saw him coming and sensed something awry. He reached to snatch hold of Finn, but Rice pitched himself against the solid body, his ether forceful enough to throw Tom to the ground. He let out a ripe curse, and, rising the next instant, snatched hold of his assailant. He might have landed a blow, but that he caught sight of Hermione as she closed on Finn, and instead turned and snatched at her mask. It came away in his hands, and the sight of her face drew from him a shout of horror. He retreated a step, then another. "Jesus, Jesus," he said. She advanced upon him, Rice's warning ringing in her head. "What do you see?" she demanded. By way of reply, he heaved up his dinner in the gutter. "He sees decay," Rice said. "He sees rot." "Mom?" She heard Finn's voice behind her, felt his little hand tug at her sleeve. "Mom? Is that you?" Now it was she who let out a cry of distress, she who trembled. "Mom?" he said again. She wanted so much to turn, to touch his hair, his cheek, to kiss him goodbye. But Tom had seen rot in her. Perhaps the child would see the same, or worse. "Turn around," he begged. "I can't, Finn. Please." And before she could stop herself, she was turning, her hands dropping from her face. The boy squinted. Then he smiled. "You're so bright," he said. "I am?" She seemed to see her radiance in his eyes, touching his cheeks, his lips, his brow, as lovingly as any hand. So this was what it felt like to be a moon, she thought, to reflect a living light. It was a fine condition. "Finn." Tom was summoning the boy to his side. "He's frightened of you," Finn explained. "I know. I'd better go." The boy nodded gravely. "Will you explain to him?" she asked Finn. "Tell him what you saw?" Again the boy nodded. "I won't forget," he said. That was all she needed. More than all. She left him with his father, and Rice led her away, through darkened alleyways and empty parking lots, to the edge of town. They discarded their costumes as they went. By the time they reached the freeway, they were once more naked and invisible. "Maybe we'll wander a while," Rice suggested. "Go down south." "Sure," she replied. "Why not? Key West for Christmas, New Orleans for Mardi Gras, and maybe next year we'll come back here, see how things are going." She shook her head. "Finn belongs to Tom now," she said. "He belongs to life." "And who do we belong to?" Rice asked, a little sadly. She looked up. "You know damn well," she said, and pointed to the moon. The New War by Lisa Morton. Pain became panic and drowning, clawing up for air, eyes opening to numbers and dates that swam, half-shadowed faces barely remembered, thoughts and images clashing, then finally coalescing, melting away until one sensation remained: pressure. Mike tried to inflate his lungs for one more breath, a simple act that took all of his focus. He closed his eyes, forced the air out, in, out. When he could open his eyes, he saw it there, crouched on his rib cage, as he'd known it would be. The black, shapeless thing. It came every night with Maria, the Filipino nurse who took care of him from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Mike sucked in breath, struggled to dislodge the thing, but he was weak, so goddamn weak. "Mr. Carson, what's the matter?" Maria stood at the foot of the bed, gazing down at him with concern that he knew was feigned. She was trying to kill him. "Go away," he said, his voice a hoarse croak he barely recognized. A patronizing smile creased Maria's broad face, and she bent down to busy herself with tucking in his sheets. "I think maybe you just have a bad dream." Mike hated her. He hated her fake care, and her accent, and her efficient bustling about that never really accomplished anything. Yes, his sheets were clean and his pain managed, but he was still here, 2 weeks after hip surgery, in a third-rate nursing home that was the best his veterans' benefits had been able to cover. He shared his room with a silent, immobile shell of flesh, whose breathing apparatus pumped and hissed. The halls echoed with cries and electronic tones. The whole place stank of disinfectant, barely covering... what? The smell of age? Of death? Mike finally identified it. The stench of rot. "I'm living a bad dream." He peered at what squatted on him. It was a black hole in the dimly lit room, but somehow he could see Maria through it. It wasn't substantial, but it had weight. It did nothing, but he could feel it trying to suck life from him. "Take your pet and go away." "Now, Mr. Carson, you know they don't let pets in here." She checked the railings that enclosed his bed, then asked, "Do you need to use the bathroom?" "No, I'm fine. Just go away." She shrugged and left. Mike had lied. He did need to urinate, but he'd rather use the bedpan than feel her hands on him, stripping the last of his dignity as he was led to a shared toilet. The black vanished, and he gasped in air. Despite the disinfectant, it was cool and good and restored him. "You won't get me so easy, not like the others." Because in the 2 weeks that he'd been here, 5 patients had died. "Dad, that's not right." His daughter Angela sat by the side of the bed, squeezed into a folding chair in the tight space between the rails and the wall. Angela seemed to flicker in and out, like a movie shown by a failing projector. If Mike looked away for a second, she vanished, only to return when he heard her voice. "Dad?" "I heard you. What's not right?" "That you've been here 2 weeks. Your hip replacement was 4 months ago." Mike gaped at her for a moment, and then shook his head. "That's ridiculous. I've only been here, well, maybe it's been 16, 18 days, but—"
"No. Your surgery was on April 16th. They moved you here from the hospital a week later. It's August 22nd now."
Angela picked up the newspaper she'd brought him and held the front page before his eyes. "See?" Mike squinted at the date. August 22nd. 4 months? But why am I still here?" His daughter answered slowly, cautiously. "Dad, I think you're a little confused." Remembering the black thing that had perched on his chest, Mike cut her off. "You have to get me out of here. That nurse, the one at night, she's killing people." Angela uttered a small, sharp laugh.
"You mean Maria? She's a nice lady and a hard worker. I get tired just watching her. She's not killing people."
After that, Angela stayed for hours, or maybe minutes, chatting about her job and her husband, and how her own back was hurting, and the doctors said she had osteoporosis, but Mike didn't really listen. His mind was on other things. Like the battle he knew now that he'd have to wage alone. Maria came that night without the black.
"How are you, Mr. Carson?"
She leaned forward as she fluffed his pillow. Her face shifted, and for a second he saw his own mother. But then he remembered, Mom's gone, and this one. "Where's your little friend?"
"You mean Manny? He's a few rooms down, I think, helping Mr. Darakian to the toilet."
Mike gripped the railings and cursed his failing strength. "Why am I so goddamn weak? I shouldn't be like this." "Did you know I fought in World War II?" Maria smiled.
"I did know that. You told me before. You even got a Purple Heart. You're a hero."
He didn't remember telling her anything. Could she somehow read his thoughts? Did the black thing get into his mind? "I took shrapnel in the back from a Jap grenade, but I survived that. I'm still in pretty good shape for 60. The nurse leaned forward in condescension.
"I think you are a little older than that, Mr. Carson."
Mike raised a hand to wave away her comment, but he froze. The arm before him wasn't his. This arm had skin that was brittle, like something cooked in a skillet. The skin was mottled, tiny white blotches interspersed with purpling bruises and lighter flesh. "This can't be my arm."
"I tell you what, Mr. Carson, I'm going to leave a note for Dr. Singh to check your medication tomorrow. You're having a little more trouble than usual."
As Mike watched, the blackness appeared, hovering over her head, descending until he saw her features through a dark curtain, transforming her face into a distorted mask. "Did you know I was stationed in the Philippines?" There was no answer. Mr. Darakian was missing from breakfast. "Where's Aram?" Mike hadn't especially liked the small, fastidious, retired jeweler, but he appreciated the man's calm, quiet manner. Carmen, the young nurse's aide, who couldn't have been more than 20, cleared Mike's half-eaten food away.
"Oh, I'm afraid Mr. Darakian had some kind of seizure last night, and they had to take him to the hospital."
Mike almost told the girl that he didn't believe her, but then he wondered if she'd been lied to as well, if she really believed that Aram had simply suffered some sort of seizure. The day was pleasant and warm, and after breakfast, Carmen steered Mike's wheelchair out to the nursing home's central courtyard, where a few other residents were already parked. Mike didn't speak to any of them. He thought most of them were either delirious or didn't understand English. Whether they actually appreciated the sun's warmth or were put there so someone else could imagine they did, he couldn't say. His life now was about waiting for meals, waiting to heal, waiting for nurses or doctors or Angela, his only visitor, waiting for the pictures in his head to stop swimming and make sense, waiting to die. As he waited, he looked in through the glass doors, watching the endless stream of people that flowed through the corridors of the nursing home. Nurses in scrubs with printed cartoon characters, doctors in white coats, visitors with magazines or candy, a man in combat fatigues. Mike sat up in the wheelchair, feeling his heart beat faster. That man had looked familiar, like Sergeant Dennis Strawn, his friend from the Pacific, who'd once yanked Mike out of the way of a Japanese sniper. Dennis Strawn, whom he'd lost touch with after the war had ended, whom he hadn't heard from since 1946. How could he be here? Mike grabbed the wheels of his chair and tried to roll himself forward, but he was immobile. Brakes. Carmen had locked the brakes, hadn't she? Mike leaned over the side of the chair to reach down for the rubber handles that stopped the tires from rolling, but the action sent a bolt of agony arcing out of his hip, and he gasped, falling back. God damn it! He had to get to Denny before he left. Denny could help, would understand. Whoa, Mr. Carson, hold on. What are you doing? Carmen rushed up to him. I saw someone I know. Got to reach him. Okay, but hang on. Carmen pushed back on the brakes, got behind the chair, and rolled Mike into the building. Which way? Except for an elderly woman dozing in a wheelchair and 2 doctors, the corridor was empty. Mike felt the disappointment like a physical blow. He's gone. Well, Carmen said, leaning down over him to catch his eye, maybe he'll be back. But next time just call me, Mr. Carson, okay? Don't try to roll this by yourself. You're still not strong enough. Mike didn't argue with her. He knew it was true. He wasn't strong enough. And he knew he wouldn't be, as long as the black thing sucked the life from him. Another one died this week. Angela looked down from the television, currently tuned to an insipid sitcom. Oh, I'm sorry, Pop. Did you know them? He shrugged. Not well, but that's 6 that have died in the 3 weeks since I've been here. Angela sighed and used the wired remote to turn down the sound. Dad, you've been here for 5 months. I know you keep saying that, but... But what? But it's not true. And the black thing's already gotten to you, my only daughter. On the television, the sitcom's lead character laughed and pointed as a woman walked past him. The woman was Mike's first-grade teacher. Where were you born, Maria? The nurse had removed the bedpan and was cleaning Mike off. He'd long ago steeled himself against humiliation, even if his attempt hadn't been entirely successful. A little town outside Manila. You wouldn't know it. You don't look like all the other Filipinos here. It was true. Virtually the entire caregiving staff was Filipino, but only Maria had more exotic eyes and a different skin tone. My grandmother was Japanese. She came to the Philippines after the war. Mike's gut clenched with certainty. He'd fought them before. Maria finished, and Mike felt a small stab of pain as she repositioned him. She saw his wince. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Carson, but you don't get another pain pill until 4. I don't want it. He was tired of being medicated. He thought it made him more susceptible to the black. The nurse shrugged and shuffled from the room. Mike saw movement in the corner, a shadow darker than what was usually there. It oozed around the ceiling and down the wall, out of his sight behind the curtain, and he knew it had settled on the comatose man in the next bed. The man would be dead in the morning. A day later, he saw Dennis Strawn again. This time he was accompanied by a wiry kid with pale skin and red hair. It took Mike a few minutes to recall the kid's name. It had been Robert, but they'd all called him Irish. He was their communications officer. He'd been killed when a Japanese Zero had strafed their camp. Or had he?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?